In this video I need to talk about the ultra low emission zone in London, which seems a very long way away from here where I am in West Wales. Thankfully so, I hate driving in London. But I'm in front of this car because effectively this car is an escapee from the ultra low emission zone of London. So this car lived right on the border, and it's just been announced that that border is going to move. So the entire Greater London area, people who have a car, I think it's Euro 3 or lower. No, I think Euro 3 is the absolute minimum. If your car doesn't meet that emission standard, then you can no longer drive it in London without paying a £12.50 a day charge. Now, amusingly, it doesn't apply to Tuk. Tuk is over 40 years old. She can merrily go bimbling around London. In fact, she has done in the past. Not a problem. And other cars on my fleet, Giselle the GSA here, Ellie the 2CV, are only a few years away. By 2026 they'll be 40 years old. They'll be able to drive in London. But for 80s and 90s stuff, like this Daihatsu Syrian behind me and the Matiz up at the back, it's bad times, because it's going to be a very long time until they're 40, and people are probably most likely going to scrap them. So what I'm saying is, before this scheme comes in August 2023, that's the proposal at the moment, scour London, because there will be so many of these cars for sale. And that's happening elsewhere as well. Bristol has just right now introduced a low emission zone. Birmingham has done so. Manchester seems to be having some troubles, but he's trying to. Liverpool is well on the way. There are rumours even Cardiff is going to go that route as well. And it just means that loads of lovely little 90s and early noughties classic cars are in trouble, and late 80s as well for that matter. And you know, these are cars, but the fact they've survived, a lot of these they're not doing big miles. This car has done 43,000 miles in its life, so it isn't actually belching out that many emissions at all, because it spent most of its time parked up, not going anywhere. But yeah, this is going to be a problem. Now, I'm not here to say that ultra low emission zones are a bad idea or whether they're a good idea. I'm very much devil's advocate on that. I can see the arguments for and against, and I think they're all pretty compelling. You know, I've been to London, probably early 2000s, and you would get black snot from all the diesel particulates. That has gone. That isn't an issue. And I also noticed, you know, when I was following Ellie to the NEC in Birmingham the other week, I was following her, and you're like, oh yeah, the smell of hydrocarbons, something you just don't get with modern efficient cars. Now, I do find it a bit irritating, because obviously the Daihatsu does have a catalytic converter, so its emissions are not as bad as, say, this GSA next to it. But yeah, it doesn't meet the required standard, so it will be on its way, and diesels have to be an even higher standard as they seek ever further to cut down on the emissions. Now, diesels have other issues, not just oxides and stuff like that, being quite a big issue with diesels, which is why I do think these schemes are a bit flawed. And it's also going to punish people, because there will be people driving around in older cars like this for the simple reason they cannot afford a modern car. So what do? Central London, you can kind of understand it. Public transport there is so good, why on earth would you drive anywhere near central London? But Greater London isn't necessarily so well catered for. So yeah, and I said I wasn't going to talk about the merits of the scheme, and here I am talking about it. But yeah, I know the comment section is going to be awash with insults and rants and all sorts. I'll try to focus just on this. This is an opportunity for us lovers of old cars. At some point, maybe we will have the same issues out in the countryside as well. But yeah, I think it's a very opportune moment to collect cars like this. And you know, these are forgotten street furniture of yesteryear in many ways. And it will be a shame if some of these, you know, lovely, well kept for low mileage cars ended up just simply scrapped. They deserve better. So I'm hopeful that, like Miss Daisy the Syrian here, more cars can escape the scheme. I must give a huge shout out to Jude Curry. If you're on Facebook, on the Cars You Don't See Anymore group, Jude, it seems to just spend his life touring London to find these nuggets, these wonderful older cars that are still in use. And he's already saved a number of cars from the existing ultra low emission zone, which this car so narrowly escaped before. Sorry, the weather is still absolutely appalling, which is why I'm standing here talking to a phone rather than trying to get too much done. Yeah, it does incredible work finding these cars and presenting them and putting notes on them, so people might say, okay, I would like my car to be saved, and here are the details. Let's see if we can get these cars out of London. So yeah, I think it's really good. I know some people might think this is a bit hypocritical of me, trying to save older cars when apparently all I care about is EVs now. But much as I love EVs and always have done, I don't hate petrol. I'm not a convert. It just happens I like both, and I can definitely see the benefits in emission terms of having traffic in your city sitting, not going anywhere very much, being electric rather than petrol and diesel cars which are belching out fumes even when they're going very, very slowly. It doesn't solve the world's emissions problems, it simply doesn't, because of the amount of emissions consumed, or produced rather, when you build a car. It is better in so many ways to keep an older car going, but I think that very much depends on how many miles you're doing. I think actually once you start looking at in-depth studies, I think they found there is a payback period where your electric car has made up for its greater emissions in build to be better down the line. So these things are not clear-cut, people, and there is a lot of stuff up for debate, but regardless of what we think, these ultra low emission zones are happening and it is going to have an impact. So yeah, if you want to grab, you know, Ford Focus, Ford Mondeo, Cavaliers and Astras, even Vectras, you know, all these cars that were just street furniture need saving. I'm sure there are plenty of Daihatsus hiding out in London as well. So yeah, interesting times, but do bear this in mind. If you're regularly driving into London, you're going to have to check whether your car meets the standards, or you'll get charged £12.50 per day for every day you're driving in London. I mean, that's the one saving grace, is that if someone does have a car like this and they're not driving it very often, they may think, okay, well, I'll pay the money. You don't get charged every day the car is parked, only when it drives and triggers a camera. But yeah, it's an increasing push towards escapism from cities for me, I must say. I like living this close to London. This is about as close as I like to be, but I know that's very simplistic and idealistic a view, because there are no jobs here. So if you actually want to be employed, you either have to do it on the internet or work in a shop and local tourism. There isn't a fat lot out here, so I understand jobs are so city centric, which is something I think perhaps we should look at. I mean, COVID gave us this opportunity for home working, which works awfully well for a lot of people in a lot of jobs. It just seems insanity, really, to be commuting to a city to do an awful lot of jobs. I actually turned down the opportunity to apply for a job on one of my favourite magazines because they were based in the Greater London area, and I was just like, I can't face that misery. I'd fairly recently moved to Wales, so I'd only been here a few years by then, and I was just like, I'm not ready to give this up. And I don't want to be commuting between the two. That would be absolutely awful. So there is a lifestyle change that perhaps people can look into, but I accept, you know, it's very ideological for everyone to escape cities. People like cities. They enjoy the convenience. How on earth they put up with driving in cities, I've absolutely no idea. I absolutely cannot stand it. Remember the absolute horror when we collected this car and had to drive it out of London. It took like an hour to get nowhere at all. Just terrible, terrible. As much as I hate the mud on the roads here and the darkness because there's no street lighting, there's a lot to love about living in a city. But as I say, it can't be for all. So there we go. That was just it, really. It's just a one-take video, just saying that if 80s and 90s stuff and even early noughties is your thing, there are going to be a lot of cars for sale. So if you're aware of such a vehicle, now might be the time to put a note on it, because yeah, these cars might otherwise end up scrapped. They are offering incentives, not necessarily incentives to buy a better car. I think they're going for more public transport incentives, like here's a travel card for a year or something. But nonetheless, yeah, they are encouraging people to scrap their actually still quite nice cars. So let's hope a great number of them survive. Anyway, Thank you very much for watching. I look forward to reading all the comments on this one, and I'm sure there are going to be a great number of them, and we shall see you in a future video. Farewell. She escaped.